And so now we're going to get into our bubble case of the week, Hall of
Mhm.
Fame bubble case of the week. So pretty much every week up until the Hall of Fame election, we're going to be examining uh, a, Hall of Fame candidate on the ballot that we consider to be, on the bubble, guys that are getting, anywhere between like 5 and 50%, 5 and 60%,
Mhm.
guys that are probably going to be on the ballot continuously. Last week we did Bobby Abreu, um, who I think is one of the more underrated on the ballot, pretty overlooked on the ballot.
Definitely.
And then this week we're going alphabetically. So Abreu was an A. Today we're doing a B. We're doing a Mark Buerhle, who you may remember from the classic Perfect Game. Being a 2005 World Series champion. A pretty eventful career for the guy, and we're gonna examine if he's gonna be a Hall of Famer.
So he's not officially on the board yet in the tracker, but I know there have been a couple writers that have announced that he will be getting their votes, but they haven't released their full ballots yet. So I think the question with Burley this year is, does he stay on the ballot, period? I don't know if he's ever going to get in, but I think he does deserve some consideration because I think it's between he and Tim Hudson as the best first year in this class, maybe Torrey Hunter, but it's between those three. So I figured we'd look at Mark Burley this week.
Yeah, yeah, we should. A lot of it is giving consideration because we're going to be doing
Mm-hmm.
some first years that might get left off the ballot. Heck, Bobby Abreu might even
Bobby
get.
Abreu is not getting in this year, and he's not getting in probably in the next like 5 years. But we're
But
gonna give him the consideration that he deserves.
Bobby Abreu might not. He might drop below 5%. Who knows? I think it'll increase, but it might decrease ultimately. Who knows? But we have to give these guys fair consideration. You can't just look at a name and think, Hall of Famer or not Hall of Famer.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, Bobby Abreu is definitely a name where you're like, no, that's not a Hall of Famer. But then you look at the numbers and it's like, oh,
Like,
there might be a case here.
yeah.
Mark Burley's kind of in between, because like I remember him for like, the perfect game and not that much else, but he put together a very consistent career that I don't think I really recognized up until this point.
I mean, he was doing the same things at age 35 that he was doing at age 25.
Yeah, that's that's very true. So I guess the with Mark Buerhle, we'll get into the on the surface stats, which is the basic numbers you see when you're making a Hall of Fame case. 59.1 B WAR, the average starting pitcher B WAR for a Hall of Famer is 73.0, but that's average, not baseline. So like, um, I guess a good example would be like Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax had 53 B WAR if you took out the hitting, and like 48 point something if you or 46 point something if you included the hitting uh in his career.
It's
But he
not
had a
fair to
very different.
include the hitting.
Yeah, exactly. So he had a very different like career path, so you have to consider that. But Burley 59.1 B WAR, Burley also 60.0 B WAR if you take out the batting side of it. He had negative -0 0.9 B WAR whenever he hit. So um, I guess you if you take that out of the equation, he has 60 B WAR just from his pitching alone. He also has 52.3 F WAR, a 3.1 a 3.81 career ERA, a 4.11 career FIP, and a 117 career ERA plus in 3,283 and a third innings pitched. Also, with the basic stats, 214 career wins, 1,870 career strikeouts, and his peak WAR was 35.8, which is 14.2 off the average Hall of Fame pitcher. 14.2 off. And in the playoffs, some guys' career can, make or break, or some guys' Hall of Fame case can be improved by the playoffs or, discredited from the playoffs. Buerhle was kind of in the middle, 4.11 career ERA in the playoffs in 30 and 2/3 innings pitched. Based off of, on the surface, what do we kind of see here?
I mean, we see a guy who kind of was behind his time in a way. Not that that's a bad thing, but he was like a 90s pitcher placed after the 90s.
Yeah, in terms of strikeout numbers and things of that nature.
Run prevention, innings pitched, strikeouts, stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of with everything. And that's not a bad thing at all. Like that, I'm not putting that against his case because he was still very effective in his own right. But he wasn't with the times.
Yeah, exactly. The more known pitchers of his era were, like Justin Verlander and, got someone who's still pitching, and like who else? Like
CC Sabathia is the most like closest comparison I can think of.
yeah, but guys that are more known for their
Yeah.
strikeouts, but Mark Buerhle was, a very contact pitcher, and I never put that against any pitcher because, as long as you get the guys out, that's kind of what it is. So
And we know that strikeouts don't automatically dictate run prevention.
exactly. So now we will compare him to guys with similar numbers to Mark Buerhle. There's about 10 to 15 different guys you could compare him to. So here's the list of retired pitchers with a B WAR between 58 and 62 in the live ball era. Pitchers with a B WAR between 58 and 62 in the live ball era. So, Mark Buerhle had a exactly 60 if you took out the hitting. So kind of a very good comparison. So there's CC Sabathia, who is a likely Hall of Famer, Juan Marichal, who's a Hall of Famer, David Cone, who is a first ballot drop, although I do think David Cone should be getting in a veterans committee at some point because he had
I would not be mad.
Yeah, he had a very interesting career. He had like a 125 ERA plus in his career or something like that. I was looking at it earlier. Pretty odd that he just kind of got left off, but I guess a lot of it is he didn't amass even 200 career wins, but that's a different story for a different day. Then there's Don Drysdale, who is a Hall of Famer. Andy Pettit, who is a possible Hall of Famer, if not for PED use. He's on the ballot, but he's been getting like 10 to 15%. Jim Bunning, who was a Hall of Famer elected through the Veterans Committee, and I think he earned it. And then there's Hal Newhouser, who's a Hall of Famer. Brett Saberhagen, who was a first ballot drop. And
how is that a thing, by the way? Saberhagen. He deserves better. I thought he had two times Cy Young winner, a 3.34 ERA, strikeout to walk ratio of 3.64. You're telling me that's a first ballot drop over 16 years too?
Yeah, it's
126 ERA plus.
It's weird.
That's bad. That's not okay.
And then the last guy between 58 and 62 B WAR in the live ball era was Chuck Finley, who was also a first ballot drop. And then there's retired pitchers with an ERA plus between 115 and 120 in 3,000 to 3,500 innings pitched in the live ball era. Buerhle, of course, 117 ERA plus in a little under 33 innings pitched. There's Dennis Eckersley, who's a Hall of Famer, but his case is a bit different because he had almost 400 career saves. He had a interesting career path. Andy Pettit, Tim Hudson, who is on the ballot, who probably we're going to be going over at some point. Billy Pierce, who was a 5th ballot drop, Dutch Leonard, who was a 7th ballot drop, and Bucky Walters, who maxed out on ballots. I think he was on the ballot 15 times. He never got dropped off, but never got to that 75% mark. So, is there anything surprising or anything eye popping from the guys that kind of share his statistics?
I mean, I think Juan Marichal is like, that's usually, if you're a diehard baseball fan, that's a name that just comes to mind sort of quickly when you think best pitchers ever, right? Like he's a no doubt Hall of Famer, and I mean he's right there. Buerle's right there with him. Also, the fact that Saberhagen is a first ballot drop, I did not know that till now. I knew he wasn't a Hall of Famer. I did not realize he was a first ballot drop.
Yeah, an interesting cast of characters with those comparisons. I think it
Considerable.
probably benefits Buerle a little bit with the number of Hall of Famers versus non-Hall of Famers. Yeah, Juan Marichal. Yeah, he's one of the faces of that era, like late 60s, early 70s. One of those guys. He had a Juan Marichal. Yeah, he had an ERA below 3 for his career. Pretty wild. But yeah, I'll get into the case against Mark Buerle. You know, saying probably agreeing with most of the writers as of this year. I don't know how much of the vote he's going to be getting this year. I feel like he will stay on the ballot, maybe get around 10%, but I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, him not being on anyone's ballots publicly so far is a bit alarming. But the case against Mark Buerle is, what I put down. His career 3.81 ERA and 4.11 FIP, not traditionally Hall of Fame worthy. And he did play in a more offensive era, and his ERA plus was 117, and a 117 ERA plus, that's better than Steve Carlton, that's better than Fergie Jenkins, that's better than Don Sutton, and also Nolan Ryan. But what I will say is Buerle did not amass the workload of those Hall of Famers. Those guys were tossing 4,500 plus innings pitched and doing it over 20 plus seasons. Buerle pitched, I think, in 16 seasons. He got, about around 3,300 innings pitched. And I know he was expected differently, and starting pitchers were kind of looked at differently in his era. But that's where he kind of stands. And him pitching in a more offensive era made it easier to benefit off of ERA plus. So you can have a 3.81 ERA and but also have a 117 ERA plus, still be 17% above average, which I guess it works both ways, sort of that way. Buerle was also in the Cy Young vote only once, and he finished fifth place. That was in 2005. So only one time in your career. I guess that's something to put against. And a lot of those guys, a lot of those BBWAA writers are guys that also vote in the Hall of Fame. So it would make sense if there was, a bit of translation. Also, Mark Buerle, it kind of makes sense that he was only in the Cy Young vote once, because he finished top 5 in his league in ERA only twice, and top 10 in ERA only 4 times. Also, he finished top 5 in B-WAR only twice in his career, and he finished, if you think B-WAR is an inferior statistic, he finished top 5 in F-WAR only once. So, Mark Buerle, he kind of had a very consistent career. He never was, the case against him is that he never was that that kind of, dominant guy who was consistently in the Cy Young conversation. He was just kind of, he was always, pretty good, always, in the top 15 in his league, but was never quite dominant. But his workload, there's a good case to be made for him because of all that workload and his ability to be, pretty good for a very long time.
So I'm going to make the case for Mark Buerhle here. I mentioned that he was sort of a 90s style of a pitcher, in the early 2000s to mid 2010s. And what that means is that he's an innings guy, and he did that better than anyone else when he played. He has more 200 inning seasons than anyone else since 1993. That would be 7 years before he debuted, and he had 14 of them. He also had another season of 198 and 2/3 innings pitched in one season. So really, if it wasn't for that, he would have 15, and I could probably push the stat back a little more. But regardless, since 1993, no one has thrown 200 innings more than Mark Buerhle has. And since 1999, only CC Sabathia, the guy I mentioned earlier as being the most comparable to him, has pitched more innings than him. And like Chris mentioned, he was a World Series champion. He helped lead the White Sox to the World Series victory in 2005. A World Series winning team where he was the best pitcher in the Cy Young conversations. Finished, I believe, 5th that year, like you mentioned. And here's my big stat that I got. Since 1990, there have been 9 pitchers with at least 8 seasons of 200 innings pitched and a 120 ERA plus. And those pitchers are Justin Verlander, Greg Maddux, Roger Clemens, Randy Johnson, Mike Mussina, Tom Glavine, Roy Halladay, Curt Schilling, and Mark Buerhle. Chris, all those names mentioned before Mark Buerhle, those are no doubt Hall of Famers. I know not all of them are in the Hall of Fame, but on paper, you look at them, you say, yeah, that's a Hall of Famer. Like, next question. And Mark Buerle's right there along with him. And that's, and that goes for longevity because that's 8 seasons. That's a lot. That's a long time to be putting up, numbers like that. And I get what you're saying with the offensive era, but no one's questioning Greg Maddux' ERA plus because of the offensive era. Same with Roy Halladay, Curt Schilling, Mike Mussina, all those guys. And you know what, Mark Buerhle, he had his Hall of Fame moments. He had the perfect game. He had the no hitter. He had the big playoff performances, and he also had the greatest defensive play that has ever been made by a pitcher. Chris, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Is the one where the ball kicks off his leg and he throws it through his legs at the first baseman. And as a bit of a transition here, he has 4 Gold Gloves, proving to be one of the best fielding pitchers of all time. So
Yeah.
that is my case for Mark Buerhle.
Yeah, there's a solid case both ways.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, 60, a guy with 60 B WAR definitely should be getting that consideration.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely should be looking at, the specifics of his career. So not really, I understand. I definitely understand both sides of it. So
yeah,
that's Mark Buerhle for and against. We broke it down for you here at the show to be named later. We gave all the comparisons you need right here. So you're welcome.